Isn't that typical? You finish a script, you go to record, and then you find out you've been preempted by Trek Central. Well, what the hell? Let's see if I can do it better. Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and today I'm going to be looking at the story, the tragic story, of the Enteprise B. And yes, some of you will notice that Trek Central, not too long ago, released a similar video. Hopefully this isn't a retread. I'll try and avoid it being a retread, because it is something that I've been asked to cover for quite a while, and again, cover more of that Lost era. Critically, this is an opportunity to explain why I believe that Excelsiors in this time period, or specifically the Enteprise B and other similar vessels, were capable of cloaking, because while this is something that I explained years ago across a spread of videos, I don't think I ever, in a single video, laid out all the evidence and explained precisely why. So if you are one of these people who have been telling me, "No, the Enteprise B can't cloak, where are you getting this from?" Blah, 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 blah. Well, this here is my explanation, and I don't want to have to ever explain this again. So, if anyone ever asks you, clip this little section, because here I lay out all the evidence, and it is quite compelling, because not everyone is necessarily caught up on that, but I don't want to have to explain myself endlessly. Without any further ado, let's get into it, and let's open with the invisible elephant in the room. So, let me break down the evidence for why the Enteprise B probably had a cloaking device. Now, to start, let me make it absolutely clear this first lot of evidence that I'm going to give you is 100% canonical. This does happen. We all see it on screen. In the Enterprise incident, which takes place in 68, we see Captain Kirk and the Enterprise steal successfully a Romulan cloaking device. Now, obviously, the stealing of that cloaking device is not exactly legal, but there is nothing as of yet that says that the Federation can't own cloaking devices. So already, the Federation has got itself a working example of a cloaking device. And it has this for several decades. Additionally, we also have Kirk's bird of prey, the HMS Bounty, which, okay, Star Trek Picard claims it was lost in the San Francisco Bay for ages. I don't really believe that, because once you have a cloaked ship in water, or in any kind of medium, cloaking only works in space, because there's nothing there. So there's nothing to show a big void where there should be something. When you are cloaked in any kind of medium, be that water or a nebula, any kind of physical medium, that cloak is going to interact with that medium and it's going to silhouette you. So the chances of the bird of prey actually being difficult to find underwater is very doubtful. So I'd also argue that it wouldn't take long for them to recover that bird of prey and yet another example of a cloaking device, although they still have the first example. So it's fair to say that by the point the Enteprise B is launched, which is 2290, the Federation would be more than familiar with cloaking technology, because that's assuming that no one else ever captured a cloak-equipped ship, but given how easily Kirk was able to do it, wouldn't surprise me if other people didn't also manage to do it. We also get further evidence of the Federation's use of cloaking devices from dialogue in Next Generation. This largely comes from two episodes, The Neutral Zone and Pegasus. So what we ultimately know is this. We know that there was a thing called the Tomed incident. We know that the Treaty of Algeron followed, and it was the Treaty of Algeron that banned cloaking devices in the Federation. Why would the Federation be banned from using cloaking devices if they weren't using them? The implication of the ban tells us that the Federation absolutely were using cloaking devices. It's right there. So, in just that canonical evidence, there is a pretty substantial case to be made that the Federation absolutely was using cloaking devices. It may not have been explicitly stated, but it is very, very, very heavily implied to the point that it may as well be explicit. Furthermore, we also have production sources which would indicate this. So in Gene Roddenberry's schematics for the refit Enterprise, it includes the provision for a cloaking device. It's right there on the blueprints. So in summary, we have the evidence that the Federation has the means to create the cloaking device and the motive. There is dialogue indicating that they probably did, and add to that Gene Roddenberry intended the Enterprise refit to be capable of cloaking. He just never got the opportunity to show it. So the ultimate implication there is that they had cloaks. I think this is a pretty open and shut case, and like I say, I don't want to have to make this argument again, because I think it's fairly clear cut. The Federation had cloaks, there was nothing stopping them from having cloaks, and they had more than the means to develop cloaking devices. This is why the Excelsior 2 even exists. If we want to give a reason as to why the Excelsior 2 exists, why does it look so different, it is because the cloaking device is housed in that bulges. I've seen people try to explain that additional superstructure by saying, oh no, it's for additional science labs. It would be flipping pointless to put additional science labs there. It is the least efficient way to increase a starship's volume. If you wanted to increase the volume of an Excelsior class, you could just take that secondary hull, the underside of the secondary hull, and extend it further back, because you have that long sort of trail behind the ship where you could just add on more hull and thus include more science lab and facilities. But they don't. They do it in as minimal way as is possible, which tells me that they weren't concerned with volume. If anything, they were concerned with minimizing the additional volume, and that was perhaps because it was critical for concealment, because it was for a cloaking device. It also fits perfectly into the timeline in terms of when the Tomed incident is, and additionally fits in with where these bulges are, bearing in mind they're close to the deflector dish. The deflector is a high energy particle projector, which is pretty important for when you are raising and lowering your cloaking device. In conclusion, the Enteprise B had a cloaking device, and I don't want to ever have to explain this again. That is my 10-minute rant on why the Enteprise B definitely had a cloaking device. There is overwhelming amounts of evidence to indicate that. Now, if you want to say that they don't, well, okay, you can say that, and you can also go and you can have your account of the Tomed incident as well from the novel Serpents Among Ruins, though I doubt you'll find that particularly satisfying. So that's my explanation, and that's the explanation that is implicit in all of my videos. Moving on. Unlike Trek Central, I really didn't intend this video to be as fiery as it is, but unlike Trek Central, who pad their video with a recounting of the prologue of Star Trek Generations, granted I just padded my video with a 10-minute explanation about why cloaking devices, whatever. Anyway, the main takeaway we'll take from that Generations prologue is that we know that the Enteprise B is under the command of Captain John Harriman, and his helm officer is Ensign Sulu. Now, after that little incident involving the death of an admiral, Harriman was cleared of any wrongdoing. However, that's not to say that the friends of Kirk regarded him particularly well, especially Chekhov. Chekhov really resented him. Going into 2294, one of its first missions was to deal with an outbreak of Terrellian plague on the Antares colony. There she encountered and defeated a Klingon renegade vessel which had been responsible for spreading the plague in an attempt to goad the Federation into war with the Klingon Empire. This was obviously one of these Klingon renegades. They successfully defeated the Klingons. It was a Katinga against an Excelsior. It was hardly much of a match. Going forward into 2303, Harriman and Ensign Sulu would go undercover in Romulan space. Now this is further evidence that the Federation and Romulan Empire were engaged in a Cold War at this time. In some sources, it's given at a later date that the Enteprise B surveyed the De Bruin ruins in the Barada system, despite the Barada system being in Romulan space. Now, the Beta Canon source puts this at a later date, But given that the Tomed incident is in 2311, I doubt that they were surveying the Barada system after that, so I suspect that this actually took place around about this time, probably about 2303. And thus, that puts a very different dimension on that survey, because that survey would have been undertaken under cloak, and is basically, when they published their survey, it's a little bit of the indication of the kind of Cold War that was going on at that time. In 2310, the Enterprise B was assigned to a joint relief effort with Kang to the Klingon world of Quadahu. However, the Klingon governor, rather than accept aid from the Federation, killed his own people. So, not exactly the most successful aid mission, but just, I suppose, Klingons will be Klingons. In any case, we then get to 2311, and you know what time it is. It's Tomed time. A key fact with regards to the Tomed incident is that we know that after the Tomed incident, Harriman will step down as captain of the Enteprise B. So, what happened during the Tomed incident? Well, I've got a whole video on what happened during the Tomed incident, so go watch that. But specifically, what happened to the Enteprise B? It is not known, but it is speculated, and highly likely, given what we know of Captain Harriman, that he snapped. This is not exactly unknown in the history of Starfleet. Indeed, in the Enterprise incident, that is exactly the ruse that Kirk uses to get aboard the Romulan ship, and it's widely accepted by the Romulans that starship commanders can just lose it. Just go completely wacko, bonzo, no longer in possession of one's faculty, completely nuts, essentially. It's not unreasonable that this is what happened to Harriman. Harriman probably wasn't very comfortable with the mission that he was given during the Tomed incident, that being to launch retaliatory strikes on Romulan worlds, inevitably killing civilians in the process. While we don't have access to all the personal logs, we do know from personal logs by now Commander Sulu that Harriman was experiencing very disturbed dreams. He was not sleeping well during the mission, and he had left behind his wife and a newborn child. All it then took was for this lethal game of cat and mouse between Enterprise B and Romulan birds of prey attempting to track them down. And that was simply too much. It was too much. He lost it. He lost his nerve. And so Demura Sulu takes command before they even get back to Earth space dock, because Harriman is rumoured to be in such a terrible state. After the Tomed incident and the loss of Captain Harriman, the Enterprise B truly begins its career of exploration. It explores the Rochen Wall, it carries out first contact missions, it engages in further archaeology. It also goes on exploratory missions near Zenkethi space, although making very sure to avoid direct contact with the rather volatile Zenkethi. During her time in that sector, she encountered many hazards, but would return home successfully. By the 2320s, she came under the command of a new captain, that being Thomas Johnson Jr. Under his command, the Enterprise B would patrol the Cardassian border and assist in rescuing Bajoran refugees who were fleeing the increasingly encroaching Cardassian presence on Bajor. It's worth pointing out that at this particular point in history, the Cardassians have not officially occupied Bajor. They maintain a colonial presence there, but they are not in total control of the planet, and it is still independently governed. And there were just as many political dissidents of the Bajoran government as there were actual legitimate refugees running from Cardassia. And because of that, it really muddled the Federation's response towards the Bajoran situation, because as well there were many legitimate refugees and many people who just wanted their homes back from Cardassia, there were also an awful lot of extremists and radicals with some rather nasty views and even nastier ways of carrying them out. She would continue in service up until 2328, where we don't know what happened, ultimately. It is speculated that the crew is lost to a plague. It's not exactly unlikely, given the nature of medical technology at the time. Quarantine procedures perhaps were not as efficient. There's still a way off of some of the latest medical advances of the 24th century. So for the crew to be overcome by a plague is not unlikely, and if anything, it's quite spooky to think about that the fact that the Enteprise B is out there completely intact, but completely dead. Alternatively, if you want a more action-packed ending to the story of the Enteprise B, then there is what is offered by FASA. That being that during a patrol in the Triangle sector, that being the sector between the Romulan Empire, the Klingon Empire, and the Federation, that little narrow area of space, she was jumped by a Klingon L-24 and a Romulan Z-1 Nova class. Get a little bit of late revenge. The Klingons would probably have been renegades. It's worth pointing out that the Stargate given by FASA translates to a lot earlier. We're talking 2290s, which would then suggest that the Enteprise B was killed as soon as it launched. So to conclude, was the Enteprise B unlucky? Was she a cursed ship? Well, no. The Enteprise B lived in extremely turbulent times. It may be said that it suffered a bit of a bad luck omen with that first voyage, but most of its career is actually quite standard for the time. It certainly survived a lot longer than the Enteprise D. Harriman gets an awful lot of shit. He gets an awful lot of criticism, but he has an unenviable position. He is living in the shadow of Captain James T. Kirk, this giant of a figure, and he is the first guy to follow, and, you know, it's immediate. The guy's still alive, at least initially, when Harriman is taking command, and indeed Kirk is still, you know, a very, very famous and recent figure in the history of the Federation. It's not like Captain Garrett or Captain Picard in command of their respective enterprises, for whom Kirk, while a respected figure, is several generations removed. Like, you've got Kirk almost literally, if not figuratively, breathing down your neck. You've got the legend of Kirk looming above him. Every decision Harriman made was scrutinized under a microscope and compared to, well, what did Captain Kirk do? And, you know, Captain Kirk had the luxury of, he was the first to do everything. Or not entirely the first, but there was no expectations on him, not really. Starfleet had only really just taken up these whole 5-year mission things on such a scale, and, you know, Captain Kirk was just another one of the captains at the time. He was not this legendary figure that he would later become, and that largely it kind of overtook Kirk himself as well. He certainly didn't enjoy being this heroic figure that everyone looked up to, because, you know, Kirk wasn't that. He wasn't this super genius. He was just a guy, and he acted generally not by the seat of his pants, but actually by doing what was sensible and what was by the book. In any case, you take that kind of pressure, you add the Tomed incident and the position he was put in and the kind of stress he was under, it's no wonder he broke. Most people would. You'd have to be extraordinarily exceptional person to not break under those kind of conditions. When you've been given the instruction to go bombard a planet full of innocent civilians, and you're worrying about what is the press going to say about you when you get back. Demura Sulu was probably a more capable officer, but equally, she also lives in arguably more stable times. That 90s decade is a really, really unstable decade. It's really bad and really unpredictable, and when you see a Klingon ship, they might be friendly or they might just start shooting and you just don't know. And then you go into the 2300s and you have a very active Cold War with the Romulans, where the Romulans may or may not decide to actually fire this time. Whereas when Demura takes command, all of that has settled down and it's much more back to peaceful exploration. Ultimately, the loss of the Enteprise B is a reminder that one should never underestimate the perils of the void. And just when you think you're safe and just when you think you're secure and nothing can stop you and you have nothing to fear, the black void of space offers up terrors that you do not yet know. It reminds me of, I believe it's a Chinese proverb or a curse. May you live in interesting times. And the Enteprise B certainly saw some interesting times. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed, make sure to, and you're new to the channel, make sure to go check out the various videos I've mentioned. I've been annotating them. Go watch them, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you to my members for supporting the channel. It is only with their support that I can continue to bring you the content that you all enjoy. My Navarks, Jeffrey Ballard, Tully DT, Rella, and Macross Schaffer. My commanders, Philip Tye, Birdmonster, Jeff Hallam, Mark Philippe, Robert Sampson, Sean Farrell, Narata, Nathaniel Mead, Gabe Logan, DM Tribal Typhoon, Nicholas Walsh, Martin McConville, JC Tech Wizard, Rizel 3D, James C, Alcara Dreamer, Joe G, Turd Ferguson, You Don't Know Trek, and Scotty O. And I salute my Centurions, Pendlebury, Marcus Hall, Julian Arnott, Freedom Trooper, Okokatum Questo, Squadra Course, John Nicole, Athes Collection, Tobias Klein, Greg Martin, Mazarine, and Bird of Play D3. And I thank all my loyal sub-lieutenants, and I welcome Patron Lev, Studio of Fresh Content Creation Inc. podcast, and John Coleman. Thank you guys for supporting the channel, and I will see you all in the next video.